Pat Mayo Hour.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Hour UFC Auckland DraftKings picks and preview. Cody Saftic in the studio. We can go more than 10 minutes today, which is nice.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have to speak at a super fast rate, and also
you still can. You can power right through it.
Oh, that's my favorite. And as we were talking about, the curse officially lifted. The first time I've gotten back-to-back main event right in a long time. So let's keep the ball rolling here, Patrick.
Winners last week?
Yeah, cash game ever so slightly. Obviously, a couple guys going bad here and there, but I think as a whole, the players that I need to come through, and even like a Claudia Gadelha getting that first round finish, I didn't see coming. Rafael Assunção grinding that through. Eric Silva was the big noticeable one. We figured he'd go out on his shield or be the guy physically doing the killing. Early stoppage or not, he got dropped a couple times. I would have liked to see the fight continue, but he was obviously one that stuck out. And the double play, and that's not something I do often. I don't generally play the two main event players on a cash game team, but we did that last week with Aldo and Max Holloway, and Aldo really didn't score anything.
But it's okay, because Max Holloway scored all the points.
Max Holloway scored quite a few points, so that's one of the reasons. That's one of the downsides to doubling up. But yeah, not a bad team last week, but I wanted to have an even better performance this week and really make the real monies, Pat.
Well, I'm in contention to win some real monies here pretty soon. We talk about that Toutmaster pool that's going on.
Yeah, you're going to jinx yourself, buddy. There's still a lot of
Hey,
time
I've been talking
left.
about it all the time. I realize there's a lot of time left, but you told me that after 3 events. Then you told me that after 10 events.
That's true.
Now we're like halfway through. I'm
You're
still in
doing
third.
good, man. You're doing good. You
want to have someone who has hot picks. Apparently it's me.
I sat third pretty much through like 70% of last season and ended up finishing, I think, 8th. So, I mean, you just got to stay consistent the whole way through, which, to your credit, you've been doing. I don't know why I'm behind you, seeing how we do this show together, but regardless, I'm on the up and up, hopefully.
It's because I'm gaming the system.
Game in the system, exactly. You're taking my plays, mixing them with the smart, logical plays, and you're just getting a happy median here that's somehow doing very good.
But it's the week-to-week consistency. I don't think I've actually been inside the top 5 scoring any one week.
But you haven't shit the bed on any event either.
No, I'm like 15th every single week.
Yeah,
so just nice steady pace. I'm just having a jog.
Let the other guys eliminate themselves.
Exactly. All right, let's get to the cash team. Who you got?
Okay, cash team, and this time it really is my cash team. Zach Otto, $9,100. Zach Otto, he's 1-1 in the UFC. He came into the UFC, makes a short notice debut against Josh Berkman. Now, Josh Berkman, seasoned veteran, a guy that's been around the game for a long time, tough season 2 veteran, and a guy that
when was tough season 2?
I want to guess 2006, 2005. 2005.
So he's not a youth anymore.
No, he's not, but still a very powerful guy, especially at 170 pounds, which is probably his more natural weight class. Good, durable guy, any stretch of the imagination. But we got Zach Otto that comes into this fight. He comes from a good wrestling background. He's got decent striking. He goes in there. He has a good performance. Comes into the UFC half-what unheralded, but a tough guy. Gets the win over Berkman in a tough split decision in a fight he took on short notice. So it's like, okay, this guy's going to have a little bit of upside to him. Second fight in the UFC, he goes to enemy territory. He has to go down to Brazil. He's taking on Sergio Moraes. Now, Sergio Moraes is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion on the ground, one of the best guys in the UFC on the ground. You don't want to go on the ground with him. And in this case, it's like, geez, you know what? I come from a wrestling background. I really embrace that grind. I'd love to take Moraes down, but I can't really do that. So let's just stay at range. They have a spirited fight, a good close back-and-forth fight. Now he ends up losing a split decision. Now, he was fighting away from home and won a split in his UFC debut, which he should have got. Lost a split in his second outing. I honestly thought probably lost that fight, but very close. Half of the MMA media ended up siding with him. And now, once again, he's short notice coming into yet another fight. What he's got going for him here, though, is even though he's got to travel to the other side of the world, Kiichi Kutamoto, his opponent, hasn't fought professionally, let alone in the UFC, in over 2 years. I think it's 2 years and 4 months. When he was fighting in the UFC, 3-1 record. Last fight against Neil Magny, he got TKO'd in the 3rd round, and that was over 2.5 years ago.
Why haven't we seen him in 2.5 years? Just didn't resign?
No, I think it's an injury problem. So he's somebody that was kind of overachieving when he came to the UFC in the first place. Maybe not a high-up guy, that went, not a big signing for the UFC when he initially made his debut, but he takes on Daniel Sarafian, who's a tough Brazil vet. And you know what? To his credit, he goes out there and he gets that guillotine choke submission in the 1st round. It's a big moment for him. Following that performance, I believe he gets Richie Walsh. And against Richie Walsh, he gets dropped in the 1st round bad. In fact, a lot of people scored that 1st round as a 10-8 for Richie Walsh. In the 2nd round, it's close, but Richie Walsh beats him again. In the 3rd round, Richie Walsh is gassed, and he has no wrestling. And Kiichi Kutamoto is able to establish a couple takedowns, and he ends up getting a decision over Richie. So now it's like, okay, you know what? He probably shouldn't have gotten that win. Let's see how he does against Neil Magny. The thing with Neil Magny is Neil Magny's too big, too long for him to strike with. So Kiichi Kutamoto shows off that outside of a good little outside leg kick, doesn't really have any striking standing. I mean, he'll throw hands with you, but not for a prolonged period of time. He wants to grapple with you. He wants to use his judo background. He wants to get you to the ground. But against the superior grappler, Neil Magny eventually realizes, you're trying to take me down? I'm just going to take you down. Gets on top of him, and at the end of the 2nd round, almost pounds him out. In the beginning of the 3rd round, it's just like, okay, I know the key to victory. Takes him down, pounds him out. That's the key to victory. Now you got this guy sitting on the sidelines for 2.5 years. All of a sudden now he's 36 years old. He's a little bit longer. He's someone that doesn't come from a traditional MMA background. He comes from a skateboarding background and eventually transitioned from one athletic to a perceived another athletic. But I think we've seen the highest highs of Kichi Kunamoto. And even though I'm not super high up on Zach Otto, I think if you're looking for a cash game play, someone who's safe at $9,100, worst case scenario is he gets taken down a couple times and he ends up losing a decision. That's worst case scenario. I don't think he gets finished, and I think that he should be able to go out there, establish control. He can get a finish of his own, and at the very least, just dominate positionally, score me some points, score me some takedowns, score me some ground transitions, and I do truthfully, honestly believe that if he does get on top of Kunimoto and he gets him into a vulnerable position, same way Magny did, take his back, flatten him out, he'll pound him out. So
why Otto over Moraga?
John Moraga's on a 3-fight losing streak, so even though he was at the top of the game at one point, he's certainly on the downswing right now, and he's a flyweight. So there's less of a chance that it's going to be a finish, in my opinion, at 125 pounds. And you got John Moraga, who's also lost his last 3. Now, 2 fights ago. Now, you look at Moraga, and the guy's fought murderer's row. I mean, yeah, he's a guy that fought for the title at one point, fought Demetrius Johnson, but he's also a guy that's lost all the top contenders. But you look at a fight 2 fights ago, it's Matheus Nicolau. Matheus Nicolau is an unheralded Brazilian who tested positive for steroids afterwards. But he just went out there and he out-hustled John Moraga, who's very tentative, doesn't throw a whole lot of volume for a 125-pound fighter.
So what we're saying
and
is
he's very, very, very highly priced here.
Yeah, he's very highly priced, and what you're saying is that as a DraftKings score, he might not be the best.
If you're going to play multiple lineups and you think you can afford Moraga on one, especially because I think Otto should be relatively played, then yeah, have a play on Moraga. But if I'm looking at which one's the smarter pick, I'm going to have to side with Zach Otto.
Tim Elliott versus, I'm going to guess, Scotty Wynn, professional poker player.
Ben
That's
Nguyen.
why you're taking him?
Ben Nguyen. You definitely knew how to pronounce the last name, because you do hear some people say Nguyen sometimes.
Oh,
It's like, no.
Nguyen.
You have to meet a Nguyen to know it's a Nguyen, but once you know, you know.
Even I am not making that mistake.
Everybody knows once you know. But anyways, Tim Elliott. Surprising that you don't remember Tim Elliott. He actually broke the DraftKings
No,
record.
I remember Tim Elliott.
Yeah. So
And that's why I'm weirded out by
Tim
this.
Elliott.
But why is he only $8,700? Like, it's weird because the DraftKings algorithm, how they kind of generally do this in every other sport, is take your projected points, put it up against your odds, and kind of filter it through their system, and that's how you get the pricing. Now, Tim Elliott is basically the best, besides, and J-Chuck, is the best DraftKings score ever.
But let me ask you this. So I believe that Tim Elliott is 3-5 in the UFC. So even though he's coming off this crazy wild performance against Louis Smolka in his last outing,
I believe
if you were to average out all of the points, you see it comes out to 74.5.
Sure.
So he scored 140 points in his last outing.
I think he
right?
scored like 170 points.
Yeah, so his average should still be significantly higher than 74.
Yeah, but when he loses, how does he lose? Quickly?
Well, he got choked out by Joseph Benavidez, but for the most part, you got to outgrind this guy, which is increasingly difficult as the years pass. I mean, he's probably one of the best scramblers in the UFC. And here's the big thing here. Well priced, yes, but he did to Louis Smolka what Louis Smolka did to Ben Nguyen. And when I look how these guys match up, that's the key to beating Ben Nguyen. I mean, he's fast, he's a great scrambler, he's got good striking, he's got good BJJ, but Tim Elliott is just kryptonite to those kind of styles. I mean, if you just want to scramble with this guy for 3 rounds, good luck.
Over under takedowns.
Against Ben Nguyen, that's the thing. I mean, I would say over 6.5. I'd maybe take the 6, so I'd have to take the under on that.
That's a lot of DraftKings points.
Yeah, but you're taking 30 points right there in DraftKings, right? And then on top of that, he's going to have ground transitions the whole time. He takes your back, he flattens you out, he lands some strikes, he gets back up, he lands some strikes, he gets the takedown again. The guy is high volume the whole way through. So do we want to play him? Yes. Are a lot of people going to play him? Yes. Does that inadvertently give a big red flag in case he loses, or in case a lot of people do have him?
But now you're in a situation where this is where playing multiple lineups can really help you out. So if you play 10 lineups, I mean, having Elliott, he's going to be the super chalk. He's probably going to be, let's say, 60% owned, 70% owned, because people know the output that he can have.
And he's well priced.
And he's very well priced, so you can fit him into your lineup and do whatever you want. So the best way to think about it is if he's going to be 70% owned, you want to own him more than that if you like him, or don't own him at all. So own him on 9 of 10 rosters, and then on that 10th roster, flip it around, take Nguyen on the other one just in case, because if he loses, you've X'd out 70% of the field.
Listen, Nguyen's a guy that when he comes in as the underdog, typically he performs a lot better. I mean, he's a guy that fights better from behind. But however, when he comes into the fight and he's got hype behind him, doesn't really perform all that well. So can he go out there in this spot and shock a guy like Tim Elliott? Yeah.
What are the odds in this fight?
Minus 340.
Okay, so it's overwhelming.
It might not be that high, but it's significant enough that Tim Elliott is 100% the betting favorite.
Okay.
And he's a guy that you're going to want to put your hat on. And the only one concern that I've ever really had with him is, can he still make 125 pounds comfortably at this stage of his career? But the answer is yes, because you see how much gas he's got in the tank and how much energy he's got in the tank and how much he's able to push the pace. Comes from a lifetime of wrestling background, that experience. He can make the weight. But Ben Nguyen's a guy that, despite being born in the States, living a long time in Thailand, in Australia, is kind of a local guy. So he's not going to have a whole lot of distance to travel in order to get to Australia or New Zealand, for this fight. And I think that in itself might help him out a little bit. So are there some small concerns with Tim Elliott? Yes. However, you're looking at a guy that can score a lot of points. You're looking at a guy that stylistically matches up fantastically against Ben Nguyen. On a cash game, he seems relatively safe. On a GPP, he's a high-point scorer. Yeah, he's the chalk play. But I tell you what, if you didn't have him last time, you wouldn't have won, right? And this time around, if he does the same thing or even half of the same thing, you want him in order to win.
Some people cashed in cash games with 2 winners because they had Tim Elliott on their team.
Yeah, exactly. Because if other people didn't play him, it was just like he scored as much as 3 guys, I mean, depending on how those 3 guys performed, obviously, but you know what I'm saying.
Next.
Okay, moving on, we got JJ Aldrich. This is a cash game, first and foremost. So, Chan Mei Jian, I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, but it's a South Korean name, so
Are there
I'm sure
a
there's
lot of
multiple
Koreans
ways.
on this card?
There's a couple. Obviously, it's not too much of a distance from New Zealand, so it makes sense to have them on the card. And you know what? I mean, always entertaining fights. This girl here, unfortunately, she's got a couple of issues going against her. First and foremost, she's 19 years old. So, like, what was anybody doing at 19 years old? I'm sure it wasn't fighting in a steel cage in front of thousands of people at an Auckland arena in New Zealand for the UFC.
Smoking weed on my couch and not going to class.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think in her situation, it's like, oh, wow, this is a huge spot for you. But it's not even a spot where it's like, yo, we cannot deny this. We cannot deny Jian any longer. She's just that good. It's like, yo, we need someone on short notice, about 2 weeks, and is anybody local? Nobody in Australia, nobody in New Zealand. Well, what about South Korea? Wow, this girl's 5-0. She's got 4 finishes and 5 wins. Yeah, she's exciting. Okay, I tell you what, JJ Aldrich is pretty young as well. I think only 24 years old. She's 0-1 in the UFC. Okay, let's put this fight together. What I like about JJ Aldrich is I've watched this girl for a number of years now, and punch output standing, she's got it. She'll stay in your face. She's ultra aggressive. She's just, I don't want to say she's got attitude, because I think in real life, she's probably a very pleasant person. But just like in the cage, she's got a chip on her shoulder, man. She's coming at you at all times. The key to beating her is taking her down. Take her down, hold her down. She'll have nothing for you. And we saw when she entered the Ultimate Fighter, she took on Jamie Morrell. Jamie Morrell's big. Jamie Morrell's rugged.
She was a loser last week.
Yeah, but she went the distance, and she got out of some tough situations against a girl that was undefeated and, has some hype behind her. And she was on the road to do it. What I'm getting at is Jamie Morrell is also like 29 or 30 years old. This girl at the time would have been like 21 years old. She's very young. But she says, according to her own words, so it's not like I'm making an assumption here because it sounds harsh, but according to her, her father was incarcerated before she was born. She comes from a broken family. They basically just dropped her off at a martial arts gym when she was 9 years old. So Jaeon's been doing martial arts since she was 10 years old. Her father took her to a Muay Thai gym in South Korea and was like, I want you to be able to defend yourself. So both of them are young upstarts. But when you look at this, Jaeon's still 19 years old, whereas she hasn't experienced that much yet. She's fought in girls that had never won fights before. And the one time that she took on a girl that was okay, she had to settle for going to decision. Her last fight, the girl was 500. She knocked her out. But prior to that, against an unheralded Japanese fighter, I believe, might have been a Korean fighter. But regardless, it's a sloppy fight, and she's not able to get the finish. She's a stand-up fighter. She, by her own accord, wants to move into the pocket. She wants to throw leg kicks. She wants to keep that high pace. And I'm looking at JJ Aldrich. JJ Aldrich is just more refined. She comes from a better striking background. She's a little more mature. She's fought at a higher level. She's already fought her UFC debut in which she went the distance with Juliana Lima, who is a credible top 15 opponent. Juliana Lima just grounded her the whole time. The fact is that JJ Aldrich spent the entire 15 minutes on her back, and she still scored 15 points in that fight, right? So give her 3 rounds of standing in the pocket with an unseasoned opponent. It should play out in her favor. Also, she's had a full camp to prepare for this fight. She's taken all the necessary steps, and for the first time in her life, she's quit her job so she could focus full-time on fighting. Good camp, comes from a good gym.
I like that
these
low-end like UFC fighters are basically like CFL players. They have alternate jobs.
You have to, because at this point, it's like, let's say you fought twice last year, and you went 1-1, and you got your Reebok money, but after taxes, it's like you're making less than $30,000.
Yeah,
so
I get it.
You have to have a job. Anyways, JJ Aldrich, this is the other thing with her, is that she knows at this point, I lost my UFC debut, and even though it was short notice, I lost on the Ultimate Fighter. This is huge for me. I just quit my job. I need this win.
I need to win.
So it's a desperate situation for her, and I see good results coming out of that. Whereas if you're the South Korean girl, I took the fight on 2 weeks' notice. I'm 19
No
years
one
old.
cares if I win.
No one cares, right? So there's not that same desperation there. So she'll come out wild, she'll come out hungry, but I think Aldrich is able to get the victory on her, and those win points will be significant because I think most of the damage she'll be doing is standing up, where she should be able to score, say, 100 significant strikes, maybe 90, 80 significant strikes, so the 40 points there plus my win. I'm looking at like 65, 70 points out of Aldrich, which a cash game, totally okay with.
Dan Hooker.
Dan Hooker. So this one's actually going to be a little greasy. I don't know why he's the favorite over Ross Pearson, and he's only a slight favorite, but Ross Pearson, I mean, the guy's been around for so long. I think 21 UFC fights to his credit. The thing is, he's lost his last 3. And at 32 years old, not the oldest guy in the world, but there's no doubt that there's just this sense of maybe Ross Pearson's getting a little long in the tooth. So what I like about Dan Hooker is that even if you're going to beat this guy down, and you could beat this guy down, he'll hang with you. You know, he'll go the hard 3 rounds. If you look at his fight with Yair Rodriguez at the time was on fire, and Dan Hooker didn't particularly match up with him well, but he's able to go with good, hard 3 rounds. That fight against Jason Knight, I mean, he's getting rocked all over the place, but he goes a hard 3 rounds. He's able to hurt Jason Knight, who people think the world of. I think the world of. Dan Hooker's always there, but he's still a very young guy. And he's a very young guy that's very motivated. He's a guy that wants to attain the highest levels. He trains with a good team. He moves around a lot, but whether he's at Tiger Muay Thai in Thailand or whether he's at the Elevation Training Center over in Colorado, the guy's training at the highest level. He's young. He's up and coming. Ross Pearson is on a 3-fight losing streak. How many guys in the UFC are on a 3-fight losing streak? Not that many, because you get cut at some point, right? So if he loses one here, absolutely back against the wall, he could be gone. But it's just it's the quality of opponents when you're looking at it. 3 fights ago, he loses to Will Brooks. Oh, no big deal. Will Brooks is the former Bellator champ. Hasn't done good in the UFC.
Isn't Will Brooks terrible?
Yeah, but you know what? While Will Brooks was expected to win that fight, so no shame, Ross Pearson loses it. His next fight, George Masvidal. George Masvidal is the man. I mean, you know what? No shame that you just lost in George Masvidal. Then it's Stevie Ray. Okay, well, you got to beat Stevie Ray. No, you lose to Stevie Ray. You know, half of Harlem Heat comes out victorious in this matchup. Now it's okay. I got a 3-fight losing streak. Well, who was I beating? You're beating guys by contentious split decisions. You know, when Trinaldo and Evan Dunham put their hands on you, they're beating you sound. When you're taking on Chad Laprise or Paul Felder, you're really hoping the judges are scoring 2 of those rounds for you because they're close. So in many ways, maybe he's just past that athletic prime of his career. But he was at one of the best gyms in the world. Lions out of San Diego, California, just a fantastic gym. But losing these fights and spending all this money to be in San Diego, which is extremely expensive, doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. So he leaves one of the best gyms in the world, and he goes back home. And by his own accord, I'm doing my own thing, getting back to my roots. Well, that's all well and good. But you're at the tail end of your career, and you're getting back to things that you used to do at the beginning of your career, the basics. Hooker's really long, and I think that's going to be the key to victory. He's got good footwork, he's got good motion, he moves around, but he sticks left jab, right jab in your face all night long. And if you're Ross Pearson, you're a guy that's pretty short for the division anyhow, but you're very stocky, and you want to go into the pocket, and you want to throw bombs. I just don't see it landing. I see him just staying on the inside while Hooker stays on the outside and just jabs away at him. He's got a nasty right hand. Knocking out Ross Pearson, good luck. However, outpointing Ross Pearson over 3, especially considering, do you know where Daniel Hooker's from? Auckland, New Zealand.
Oh, he's from New Zealand.
He's from Auckland, New Zealand, right? So he's going to have the crowd behind him. He's going to have the fans behind him. I'm not saying necessarily hometown cooking, but I'm saying in a close fight, sometimes that makes a difference. And if you look at Ross Pearson's track record, doesn't always get the nod in close fights. Sometimes he does, but maybe not in hostile territory here. So I got to go with Dan Hooker.
All right, round out the team.
Rounding out the team, Vince Pichel. Good God. Vince from hell Pichel hasn't fought in the UFC in 3 years. The last time he fought against Anthony Njokuani, so he comes off the Ultimate Fighter, and he's okay in the Ultimate Fighter, but he loses to Ally Quinto, who's a tough guy, obviously. And then he gets his bicep destroyed. He has to get it reconstructed. So I'm like, this guy might not be any good. Comes back and thrashes this guy named Garrett Whiteley, who is pretty much never seen ever again. And then he gets Anthony Njokuani, comes in as a slight dog. Paul Shaughnessy notoriously picked Vince Pichel, I don't know why, over Anthony Njokuani. He goes, I think he wrecks Anthony Njokuani. And then he gets hurt again. And he's been off for 3 years.
3 years? With what?
3 years. I'm shocked that he still has a UFC contract. How's this man still on the roster? Also, does he have Medicare? Have you just been paying his bills the last 3 years?
What injury would keep you out for 3 years?
Well, it could be a number of things. You know, you're rehabing one thing, and something else
happens. Sure, that just seems like a really long time.
Well, think about it. When they're going to be playing highlights of this guy as he's getting ready to come to the ring, Kuchi Kunamoto, same way. They don't have Reebok.
I was going to say, they won't be in HD?
Yeah, exactly. They'll just be wearing, their full sponsored trunks. And I don't know. All jokes aside, it's just Vince Pichel's been on for a long time. And I think prior to that, he trained at John McCarthy's gym, which John McCarthy, the referee, yes, we were talking about the same person. He had a gym in California for a while. And I believe that's where Vince Pichel was training at. So
why are we taking him?
I didn't really respect the guy all that much. But the fight against Anthony Njokuani's a Muay Thai specialist and a guy that was durable and a guy that certainly at the time had some hype behind him, but lacks a ground game, right? Same thing with his brother Chidi, who's, once again, they fight very similar, but big, strong Muay Thai guys, you got to get this guy down. Vince Pichel goes out there. Boy, oh boy. This guy's strong, man. This guy's extremely strong. He'll go out there and he'll just ragdoll you and pound you. And it was a good performance out of him. We would have liked to have seen more out of him. Technically speaking, I think he's like 9-1 right now. He's got a good record. He's been off for 3 years, so it's a big question mark. How's he going to come back? Now, against Damian Brown's from Australia. So that in itself is like, oh, maybe a bit of a red flag there. But Damian Brown's 15-8. He's a guy that's one of the few guys on the UFC roster that has endured a 5-fight losing streak in his career, and yet has still made it to the UFC. He was long considered a journeyman on the regional scene. He came to the UFC with a short notice replacement, and he got smashed as a short notice replacement. But as a short notice, they give you one more. And, he happened to win the one more, you know? Good little fight for him against a guy that's not UFC caliber that shouldn't be in the UFC. So when I look at Damian Brown, he's got a couple things going for him. He's in fantastic shape. He's a decent little grappler, ever-improving striking. But Vince Pichel is just too big, too strong. And the fact that he's been off 3 years, it's a huge red flag, but he's $7,800, and I think that's well priced. I think the reason why he's so cheap is because we haven't seen him in so long. So you might be able to squeeze some value out of there if he's as good as ever. And presumably he's healthy. He shouldn't be all that injured. He was getting ready to take this fight. So I don't know. I think he's probably at a decent spot in his career. I like the price, and I think if he goes out there and look at the fact that his 2 wins in the UFC are both by decision, and he has 80 points averaged, right? This guy scores points, even in just dominating efforts. And I think against Damian Brown's got to rely on you fatiguing or you being less physical than he is. Vince Pichel's just not neither of those things. So I'd have to go with him. And then Thibaut Gowdy. This one's not popular. It's not popular at all.
Not even by you with the way that your
No,
face is
well,
shaped right now?
mean, I have $7,500 left, and Thibaut Gowdy's $7,400. But I just think he's like the best of the rest. You're gonna have to take somebody on your team that you
don't like.
Listen, could I just tell you right now? Oh, I'm gonna give you a 6-fight parlay. Bet these 6 favorites, and they're gonna win. It's like, oh man, which one's gonna screw it up? So there's got to be somebody on your team that you're not huge on. The thing with Thibaut Gowdy is it's a 50-50. He can win this fight. He can lose this fight. We're flipping the coin and we're hoping it lands on Thibaut Gowdy. So Thibaut Gowdy, as we were talking about Ross Pearson Pearson's on a 3-fight losing streak, but he's got 21 fights in the UFC, Pat. He's an Ultimate Fighter veteran from a long time ago. He's a named guy in Europe. We can keep this guy. Thibaut Gowdy's also on a 3-fight losing streak. He's only fought in the UFC 3 times. Beyond me how this guy's still in the UFC. No idea. But he didn't really get the fairest of shakes. So undefeated guy, comes to the Ultimate Fighter, has a wicked fight to get into the Ultimate Fighter. Unfortunately comes up short against a phenomenal opponent. No big deal. Goes to Finland, where he was previously had knocked out a 7-0 opponent, so they brought him back out to take their hometown guy, Anton Kuvanen. He knocks out Kuvanen. So UFC says, okay, we'll give you a shot. They bring him in to take on another Finnish guy. And you know what? He got caught by an uppercut like 20 seconds in, gave up his back, got choked up by a good jiu-jitsu guy. It happens. He got caught. Not the greatest performance. He had hurt his hand going into the bout, I heard. Doesn't matter. He loses. Second fight against Canadian Olivier Aubé-Mercier. He has to go on the road to take the fight. He's taking a guy that's bigger than him, stronger than him, better on the ground. He shows off some promise. First round, he does good. He lands some shots. His takedown defense, much improved. Second round, takedown defense looking good, but near the end of the second round, or halfway through the second round, he does get taken down. Now he looks tired. Now third round, he is tired. He gets taken down again. He gets choked out. He's 0-2 in the UFC. Takes a third fight on the road against a Canadian, Chad Laprise. Minute and a half into the fight, he just lunges into a right hand. No idea why, right? So, terrible run. He's 0-3 in the UFC.
This guy sounds fucking terrible.
He's been finished all 3 times, and he's 0-3 in the UFC. But why is he even still in the
he scores a glorious 8.2
in 3 outings.
3.2 average per fight.
8.2.
Oh, sorry. Hey, there's a dog.
Give him some credit. So I know that there is some gigantic warning flags all over Thibaut Gowdy. But let's talk about the couple things that he does okay, right? First of all, at 30 years old.
Cool name.
Thibaut Gowdy. And his
good name.
But his nickname's GT, which is his initials backwards.
So he's like GT Cruiser?
GT Racer. You guys didn't have those?
No.
You don't have Hills in Nova Scotia?
We do.
Anyways. Okay, Thibaut Gowdy's 30 years old. So presumably, prime of his career right now. Even though he's not fighting like it, he's not war-torn, he's still fresh enough, right? Now, when he came to the UFC, he decided, I got to get out of France, presumably. I got to get out of France, and I got to go get some high-end training. So I went to Greg Jackson's gym. And then you make a full switch like that, maybe you don't see the effects right away. But it's important to note that outside of the Pekelin fight, which he got caught with an uppercut and got choked out, let's just take that one off the table for the time being. Because look at the fight with David Tamor. I mean, he takes gigantic shots. And that David Tamor is widely considered the fucking man right now, right? So what I'm saying is when he's on, he can hang. But the second fight against Olivier Aubé-Mercier, bad stylistical matchup. Because you know the guy's going to take you down. He showed off much improved striking as well, which I don't think anybody really expected out of him. But he's so big and he's so strong and just wears on you. And you're taking this fight on the road, bad matchup for him. But he did show improvements. Now, the third fight, he gets knocked out in 90 seconds. So you don't get to see the improvements. But I'm sure he's still getting better. Now, what I'm expecting here is that he's now officially moved to Albuquerque. He lives there full time. He's done the full camp with Greg Jackson's gym. He's wrestling with all the guys. He's striking with all the guys. He appears to be in good shape. We're talking about guys with their back against the wall. Nobody has their back against the wall more than Tebow Gowdy. He's on a 3-fight losing streak. The UFC is not going to give him another crack, and they're sure as hell never going to bring him back if he went 0-4 in the UFC in his initial run. So pressure's on him, but he's done the right moves. He's trained with a good gym. As I mentioned, only 30 years old, and he's a banger. He's got good hands. Now, Dong-Yun Kim, which is the fake Dong-Yun Kim, because Stun Gun's the man. So Maestro's not the man.
Which guy screwed us like 6 months ago? We were all in on him, and he just got worked. And then we were all off of him the next time around, and then he won. Is that the good one or the bad one?
Dong-Yun Kim, the good one's on a roll right now, and this guy won his you know what? It would be this guy. This is who it was. Because he fought Polo Reyes in his UFC debut. Actually, he fought Dominic Steele in his UFC debut. Short nose, 170 pounds. Ragdolled. Oh! Knocked out. Oof. Devastating. The Polo Reyes fight, he shows off a lot of promise. His striking defense, non-existent. But his striking offense, not bad. Good little left hook. Very aggressive. Stays in the pocket. Cardio checks out. Good takedowns. He only really resorts to his takedowns when he's getting rocked in that Polo Reyes fight, which is a shame because he's a judo black belt and he's got good takedowns. But it's a fun fight. It's a fun fight that's likely 1-1 going into the third round, and he gets knocked out senseless in like minute and a half, 2 minutes into the third round. So here's the thing with him. Never been knocked down in his career before. He's a guy that shouldn't have come to the UFC, right? Not UFC quality, right? Let me say that again. Not UFC quality. But he came to the UFC because it was short notice in South Korea. So they needed a guy. So they were like, oh, here's a local guy. We'll bring him in, okay? You look at his record prior to signing with the UFC, and he had a 2-year gap off because he did military service, which is mandatory in South Korea. Yep. But he had also lost a couple fights to guys that were like 11-14. So he wasn't particularly great, but they needed a guy, a local guy. They said, hey, do you want to fight Dominic Steele? He said, sure. And he got thrashed, knocked out. He got slammed on his head in the third round, and that knocked him out. Pretty nasty. But he comes back like 6 months later against Polo Reyes. And it's probably, I'll go on record to say this, it's probably one of the top 3 greatest fights of all time in MMA. Certainly in the UFC. Manhoff versus Cyborg for me is still number 1. But if you're looking at in the UFC, this fight, like pound for pound, action for action, like minute per minute, second per second, pound, like whatever you want, whatever measurement you want to use, that is an exciting fight. And for that and that reason alone, he's got a little bit of notoriety. But he loses the fight and gets knocked out. So in his mind, it's like, I've never been knocked out before. Now I just got knocked out in devastating fashion 2 times in a row. So he comes back against Brendan O'Reilly, and it's a fight that's stateside. Brendan O'Reilly's 6-2 in the UFC. He's undersized. He's 5'9". The only guy he's ever beaten, Chris Indich, is a complete schmuck. Sorry, Vic Gruchik. All the same. Schmuck. Brendan O'Reilly's not very good. He goes out against Brandon O'Reilly, and here's the issue. Brandon O'Reilly just got awarded his black belt. Brandon O'Reilly, by all stretch of imagination, is a grappler, right? And also, he's 5'8". He's short. Maestro showed off in his last fight against Polo Reyes that he can bang. He's got a great left hand. He switches stances well, decent kicks. Mix it up with him. He had a very, 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 unwilling desire to engage with him striking whatsoever. Part of me believes that's because of the back-to-back concussions. You go from never getting knocked out in your career and having a war, which that kind of war against Polo Reyes will take it out of you. It'll take it out of you big time. He's only 27, but it takes it out of you. And then to go in against Brendan O'Reilly, his game plan was, I'm just going to hold this guy. So in the first round, he takes him down and he holds him. And in the second round, he takes him down and he holds him. And in the third round, he's gassed out. Brendan O'Reilly wins the round. Close round. But Brandon O'Reilly wins the round. He ends up scooping up a 29-28. So that's his last fight, and it's not all that impressive.
So Tebow Gowdy. So
I'm matching up these guys in my head. I've watched all the footage in the world that I could, and I'll admit, it's a 50-50 fight. The odds reflect that. I think they're both minus 115. However, the way it keeps playing off in my head is that Maestro goes in there. If he wants to throw hands early, then he's playing into Tebow Gowdy's game. Tebow Gowdy wants to throw hands, and he's got heavier striking power, and he's just probably a little more refined, to be honest. He's got better head movement. His hands stay up a little bit higher. His chin's not as good, I'm going to admit that, but I don't think that Maestro's going to land that kill shot on him. So Maestro resorts to getting to his grappling. And with Gowdy, he spent his last couple camps worrying about the grappling. So I think that he does the same thing with Aubé Mercier as he stuffs the initial takedowns, only Maestro ain't Olivier Aubé Mercier, sorry. They're not the same quality of guys. He's not as big, he's not as strong, he's not as tenacious, his gas tank's not as good. So if he doesn't secure those takedowns, he's going to get into another war, and I'm just going to edge out Tebow Gowdy to take that. So as much of undesire I have on Tebow Gowdy, I'm going to play him on my cash game because he's well priced. I am also playing him on my GPP. But just so that you don't get the impression that I would load him everywhere, on the bonus team, which I've provided you, No T-Bow Cody.
So on your main GPP team, you have Gowdy, you have Otto, you have Elliott as holdovers, and now you have Derek Brunson at 8,700.
Yeah, Derek Brunson, I mean, if you're talking about a GPP, this guy's a GPP and a half. I mean, just look at the way he finishes fights traditionally. And I know people will say, guy's lost his last 2 fights. But yeah, this guy's a guy that almost appears to be afraid when he gets into the octagon. And what I mean by that is he gets in there and he's just like, I got to take this guy out as fast as possible before something happens. And he goes out there, takes care of business real fast. And my boy Ed Herman. Nobody takes out Ed Herman. Holy shit, Brunson just destroyed Ed Herman in the first round. Well, you know what? Sam Alvey. Nobody takes out Sam. Holy shit, Derek Brunson. And then on top of that, you throw in guys like Uriah Hall. It's like, oh my God, Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker's getting a title shot, interim title shot. Robert Whittaker's getting a title shot. Brunson put the heat on him. Didn't knock him out. Whittaker knocked him out, right? So that's the thing with Brunson. He either goes all the way in or all the way in. So his last fight against Anderson Silva, he's like, you know what? I'm not going to fight like a regular Derek Brunson. That proved to be a terrible idea because as a result, he got ever so slightly edged out by Anderson Silva. And the reason why that is because the judges of his cage side are like, Derek who? Oh, Anderson Silva. Close enough round. I'm just going to give it to Anderson Silva. I thought Brunson won that fight, but it was a terrible fight. All he's got to do is get back to what he used to do, and he will crush Dan Kelly. Buyer beware, the last 6 guys that were supposed to do.
Oh, is Dan Kelly the racist guy?
No. Dan Kelly's the guy.
Because we're taking that guy every time, by the way.
Yeah, Mike Perry.
Yeah, Mike Perry. We're taking him every time he's on a card.
Yeah, Dan Kelly's the guy that cost me an unbelievable amount of cash his last time out when he beat Rashad Evans. And for that matter, I mean, he pretty much cost me every time. Steve Montgomery, he was supposed to lose that fight, okay? Why would Montgomery let that stupid fucking foot trip takedown in the third, blew it for him? Antonio Carlos Jr., takes him down the first, dominated him, gasses out. Chris Camozzi, no ability to grapple whatsoever. Dan Kelly is the little engine that just keeps on chugging. I've made good money off him once, and that was when he went the distance with Pat Walsh, was plus 600 decision. I mean, craziness. Anyways, Dan Kelly, you can't overlook this guy. So when you look at the odds, they're overlooking him again. When you look at the DK pricing, they're overlooking at him again. But this is a Cinderella story, guys. I mean, how often is this guy going to come through? I mean, yeah, he wasn't supposed to come through his last number of times, and he does. And at some point, someone's going to run into him. Now, does he have a shot at winning this? Yes, because if Derek Brunson blows his load too early, Dan Kelly's proven that over 3 rounds, maybe he gets a little more steam as the fight goes on. And he seems to be fairly durable. But he himself got knocked out against Sam Alvey in under a minute. He was also on the Ultimate Fighter where he took on Sheldon Westcott. Sheldon Westcott's a guy that also fights very afraid, and that recipe worked tremendous. So if you talk to Dan Kelly, both of his knees are shot. He went to the Olympics 4 different times, right? He's a little bit older in his career. And you talk to him and you say, you know, you're on a big winning streak right now. You're trying to take on some good guys like Rashad Evans, Derek Brunson. But he'll be the first one to tell you, like, I don't know how far I can take this. And what he means by that is, like, my body's shutting down. You know, I'm going to take on big, fun fights in my own backyard. I think he's from Australia. This is New Zealand. But you get what I mean. That part of the world. I'm going to take fun fights that appeal to the crowd. The fans love the guy. They always rally behind him. But he's a tad bit chinny. His knees are worn. And that judo background only plays well against guys that don't know how to wrestle. Derek Brunson is the best wrestler that he's faced off against in recent years, especially when you consider that Rashad Evans' wrestling is completely out the window at this point, and Brunson's the guy that took down Yoel Romero. So I'd have to say Brunson just goes in there, steamrolls him, gets the win. At $9,000, though, he still is risky, whereas Zach Otto, who I also have on this team, is on the cash game play instead at $100 more because he's the safer option. Brunson should be able to score a tremendous amount, but there is inherent risk there that Zach Otto shouldn't be facing. So that's the reasoning behind taking Otto over Brunson in a cash game, but I definitely seen the merit to Brunson in a GPP.
All right, you got 2 in a row for the main events. Now you got Mark Hunt over Derek Lewis, who I recall last time was UFC Halifax. He had to shit his pants.
Well, see, that's the thing, right? This is another 50-50 fight when you consider that both guys are 265 pounds. Both guys are massive heavyweights, and both guys can knock out the other guy. When you look at Derek Lewis, he's got all the power in the world, but can he take a good punch? Well, I don't know. I mean, Matt Mitrione knocks him out in under a minute, and Sean Jordan, that crazy-ass kick, but kind of just grazed him, and, well, it knocked him out. And then you look at that Travis Brown fight, and the whole time it looks like he's about to crap himself. Shots to the body, sure, but, like, what were the shots to the body? Were they that significant? When you look at Mark Hunt, cast iron chin. But you can knock the guy out. I mean, we've seen it before, and also, I mean, Derek Lewis. I mean, come on. If he hits you, presumably you're going to get knocked out. But the thing is with Derek Lewis is he's another guy that he's overachieving in many, many, many ways. And I look at Dan Kelly as one of those guys that he's winning, and he looks good, and he might get some hype behind him, but he's going to get stomped out at some point. And Derek Lewis' case, I think that's the exact same scenario. So you look at his last number of fights. So his last fight against Travis Brown, should have got TKO'd in that fight. In fact, when he turned his back to Travis Brown, held his gut, and essentially started to march over to the cage, a lot of refs would have stopped that fight. Good thing they let it to continue. Derek Lewis gets the win. But you look at the fight prior to that, Shamil Abdurakhimov. Well, he loses the first 3 rounds of that fight. I had it 2-1 going into the 4th, but if that's a 3-round fight, Pat, he loses. But he's got a little bit of gas. He knocks out Abdurakhimov in the 4th. Not the prettiest of fights. You look at the fights with Victor Pesta, where he's losing early. You look at a lot of these performances. Roy Nelson, the split decision he won, I thought he lost that fight. Is he the most impressive guy we've seen? Or do we just like watching him because he's the Black Beast and he puts on entertaining fights and he's really entertaining on the mic, and if you follow him on social media, it's great. Do we like his character or do we like his fighting? And to that point, when I look at him fight, he seems to make just all types of mistakes. Crosses his feet when he moves. His hands are always just real low and he just waits to explode on you. He's very lumbering, but he's got the power and he can get away with his technical deficiencies because of that power, because of that aggressiveness. Because he only needs one shot to land to knock you out, it doesn't matter if he does the wrong thing for the first 2 minutes. If he does the right thing at 2:05 of the round, he's going to knock you out. I get it. But Mark Hunt's a guy that even at 43 years old is a guy that's a former K1 kickboxing world champion. He's a guy that, technically speaking, is going to be a lot sharper. The leg kick should be there. The body kick should be there. The counter left hook should be there. The uppercut, even though he's a little shorter, it'd be harder to land it. He's going to have more weapons at his disposal, and all it takes is one. So even though he'll be a little bit slower, I think he's a little more durable. And if he can just land that shot the way I need him to land that shot, $8,000 on a GPP, it makes sense to me.
Last guy,
Luke the Jedi Jumo. 100% we're going for it on a GPP.
Israeli fighter?
No, Australian fighter. Jumo's been around for a long time, 11-3, decent little record on him. The thing is that he comes from a Taekwondo background, black belt in Taekwondo, transitions to MMA, and he's a finisher, man. If you want to stand right in front of him, he could knock you out. If you don't stand in front of him, take you down, he'll try to submit you. The losses he's had in his career are against guys that went on to the UFC. I think his last loss was to Jake Matthews, who's kicking some ass in the UFC right now. So when he loses, not to bad guys, and when he wins, decent guys, but he's getting better, and the main thing here is that striking background. So when he takes on Dominique Steele, first and foremost, I'm a Dominique Steele mark. But I like money more than I like Dominique Steele. And I'm not saying Dominique Steele is going to lose this fight. He's the favorite. He's rightfully so the favorite. But we got to look at what has he got going against him. And what he's got going against him is that Jumo $7,700 in a GPP, and I'm saying this right now, we're going for it. It's a GPP. We need those finishes. Not a whole lot of guys are going to play Luke Jumo, but Jumo's coming in here and he's a bit unheralded. If you look at Dominique Steele, first of all, he hasn't fought in 8 months. He got injured, he had to pull out of a fight against Kyle Noak, and as a result, he's been sitting on the sidelines for 8 months. Now he's got to travel to the other side of the world, coming all the way down from, he spends time between Kentucky, Ohio, and Colorado, but it's all the same. Is that the Midwest? Is that considered the Midwest?
Yep.
He's coming down from the States all the way down to New Zealand. That in itself is going to take at least something out of him. So he's been off, he's been injured, he has to take all that distance, that travel. He's lost his last 2 fights in the UFC. Both of those fights that he's lost, his last 2 fights against Court McGee and prior to that against Danny Roberts, I thought he won. I thought there's certainly a good case that he won. But in close fights, they don't give it to him. So if this is a close fight where he's on the road against the hometown guy, at the very least, Jumo's got that ability. But here's the thing. Here's the big thing, which is why we're going Jumo. Jumo is a finisher. He does have that Taekwondo black belt, but he's a striker by nature. He wants to stay in the pocket. He's a little faster than Dominique Steele. And if he can take this into the later rounds, he's going to have all the chances in the world to land shots. But Dominique Steele's got 8 pro losses. 4 of those losses have come by way of knockout. Of those 4 knockouts that he's suffered in his career, all 4 of them were in the first round. 2 of them in less than a minute, 1 of them at a minute 10, and 1 of them in less than 3 minutes. He is considered chinny by a lot of people. Now, in his last 2 fights against Court McGee and Danny Roberts, they never landed that shot on him. But against Danny Roberts, he was so tired, he just held him. He held him against the cage, takedown. He got elbowed a whole lot of times. He lost that fight, in the judge's opinion, because he didn't do anything with the takedowns. In his next fight, he abandons the takedowns and tries to strike, and Court McGee ends up out-grappling him. Ring IQ is not huge. 2-fight losing streak, traveling to the other side of the world, coming off an injury and an 8-month layoff, taking on the hometown guy, and perceivably maybe has chin deficiencies. I'm going to take the shot on Luke Jumo here.
And you're doing that on your bonus team, too.
Yeah, well, because the bonus team, I got to get rid of T-Bow Gowdy, because I don't want to give you the impression I'm playing Gowdy all over. But you need someone who's sub $7,800, and Jumo and Gowdy, those are the 2 guys that I like.
Well, this team is more balanced. So we've already talked about all of these guys, but give me a quick refresher.
Well, that's what I mean. Okay, so what I'm saying is I'm giving you a GPP team where I'm outlining I like these guys, but there's some danger. And the cash game teams, I like some of these guys, but, they're just safe. So this is a more balanced team. You got Derek Brunson because, yeah, he's not the safest guy in the world, but he's a finisher. And this is, I told you, a bonus GPP. We want the finish. We got Derek Brunson to go for that finish. Tim Elliott. If Tim Elliott finishes, great. If not, if he can score me 100 points with all those ground transitions, that's great. Let's say I got 200 points right there. I'm happy man. JJ Aldrich, $8,600, not bad. She can go out there and dominate a fight for 3 rounds, land all that. I'm saying, let's say 80 points out of her. Let's say we're sitting at 280. Mark Hunt can go out there and he can get that first round knockout. I know he can. If it's not in the first round, it's the second round. This is all wishful thinking. He scores 100 points. Yeah, wishful thinking.
When you play your GPP teams, you're thinking, what's the best case scenario that could happen?
Yeah, so Mark Hunt gets me 100 points. I'm looking at 380. Vince Pichel could get the finish, but mostly he'll go out there and he'll dominate by unanimous decision. What we've seen by his average of 80 points in a dominating unanimous decision is that's what he averages. So if he goes out there and he does what I need him to do against Damian Brown, who's not all that good, less than 100. Let's say it's 80 points again, right?
Yeah, but you have to, even now, win by decision is worth more than it was 3 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah, fair enough. So if I could get 460 between, I'm looking at 450 to 500 between those top 5. That's all wishful thinking. Then Jumo's the one.
Jumo's the one if he gets a quick knockout, he scores 120 points and you win. This is what you're going for here.
People are not gonna play him. And I really think that when people are like, yeah, well, Dominique Steele hasn't been knocked out, in a decent amount of time, it's like, do you want to talk about some of the guys that have knocked him out? I mean, Travis Clark, Jose Figueroa, Zach Cummings is the man, but it only took him 43 seconds. You can clip this guy. You can definitely clip this guy. And on GPPs, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the guy that costs $7,700 that's got a chance to knock you out. And it's not just that one guy's considered chinny. It's that Jumo traditionally wins fights by finish, right? So, I mean, I'm just got to play the stats on this one.
Cody Saftic. Check him out on Twitter at CJ Saftic and every week on the MMA Report with John Pollock now.
Yeah, good times.
I'm sure that's a more back and forth conversation.
Yeah, we're talking about most of the big news stories. Headlines.
What's the big news of the week?
Well, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson feels like the UFC's bullying him.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like Lolo Jones on the challenge.
I don't necessarily disagree, but people got to realize there's 2 sides to every story. And I'm taking Demetrius Johnson's side, and we've mostly all just heard his side of it. But there's some glaring holes in his argument. There's some glaring holes in, his side of it. And for that reason, yeah, he's not completely in the right. But, yeah, you can't bully someone into taking a fight. And in a world now where everything's considered bullying, it's hard to say he's getting bullied, but yeah, no, this is stiff arm tactics that are just not cool, man. Not cool.
Up on the Fight Network YouTube page?
Yep.
iTunes
yep.
as well?
You can check it out on iTunes. I believe Podomatic as well, but
cool.
Yeah, good time.
You can check out the Pat Mayo Hour anywhere where you can download podcasts for free, and always you can subscribe to the Fantasy Sports Network or Fight Network pages to watch the Pat Mayo Hour. Good luck this week. I'm Pat Mayo. I'll see you next time.